What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the last full week of the month. Another NFL week is in the books. We're approaching the halfway point already. This is what always happens. The NFL season takes forever to get here and then flies by extremely quickly. Whether your team is having a good season or not, whether your fantasy team is having a good season or not, this shit always goes by incredibly quickly, or at least that's how it feels. Already near the end of the month. We got week 8 on deck. Hopefully everybody's in a good position in their leagues from a record perspective. If you're close to the bottom of the standings, it's probably dire at this point, but as long as you're not completely winless, it all can't be ruled out just yet. But that means we got to do a little bit of course correction to get you there. Welcome to another episode of Facemask Fantasy. Going over some waiver wire options, likely waiver wire options that are available to you in your league. Going into week 8, we'll talk about some of the top pickups that are most likely still on waivers ahead of either tonight or tomorrow. Tonight waivers to run Wednesday, or tomorrow night's waivers that end up ultimately becoming Thursday pickups. Probably a decent number of these guys are available, so we can go over that. And of course, if you guys have, as always, any questions that pertain to your specific situation, we can go over those as well. The members will get first priority, as per usual, but I will get to the general public eventually. So if there are any questions from the general public, we'll go ahead and we'll get to those following the members. Another unpredictable week in the NFL. A couple of things that I was not very confident about. We got some clarity on, I guess most specifically, the Rams backfield. I wasn't super confident about any one player in this backfield going into the week. There was just a lot of unknown going on. But as it turns out, in a situation that isn't always the case, we were able to take coach speak at his word. Sean McVay made comments leading up to the Rams game against the Steelers that seemed to indicate that Darrell Henderson would get first crack at opportunities in that backfield, and that's exactly how things played out. Said Royce Freeman would mix in, and kind of hinted that Zach Evans was still very much in a developmental role. That pretty much played out exactly as we expected. Darrell Henderson had a strong game. Royce Freeman was the change of pace guy with a low-end flex performance, and Zach Evans did not get into the game. Or if he did, I don't believe he saw a single touch. So that puts Darrell Henderson squarely on the radar, the waiver radar for week 8, especially if you need running back help, which is a lot of people, most likely. He's looking like a viable flex play now for the next 3 weeks as we wait for Kyren Williams' return. In that time frame includes the Rams bye week. I believe it's week 11. So we're not going to get Kyren Williams until week 12. Could be week 11 or 12. Regardless, Darrell Henderson, viable flex play over the course of the next couple of weeks if you need him. He's not going to be the guy rest of season. You would think that once Kyren Williams is healthy and ready to return, he will go back to the role that he previously had to start the season. But Henderson had he had a productive day from a fantasy perspective. He didn't have the most effective day as an NFL running back. 18 carries for 61 yards to the tune of almost 3.4 yards per carry. That's not very good, but in fantasy land, we don't necessarily care about that because he picked up over 60 yards of offense and scored a touchdown. And for your flex play, that's all you freaking care about. He's got a tough matchup this coming week against Dallas on the road, so proceed with caution. But Green Bay week 9, nothing scary about that matchup. And then Seattle and Arizona at home and on the road, respectively. That's not too bad. And so, yeah, week 12, and it's a week 10 bye week for the Rams, not week 11. So Henderson figures to lead the backfield weeks 8, 9, and 11, in addition to this previous weekend. Week 10 bye. Kyren Williams will be out through week 11, but is expected to return week 12 on the road against the Arizona Cardinals. Until that happens, I guess Darrell Henderson is a viable flex option. Maybe not this week on the road against Dallas. That's a tough spot. But week 9 and week 11, Darrell Henderson looks solid. So I wouldn't necessarily break the bank for him if you still utilize FOB. I'm maybe looking at 5 to 7-ish% of my budget. I'm not necessarily going overboard here. One, because I'm not sure that we have another usable week from him this week on the road against Dallas, but he should be decent week 9 and week 11. But if he is still on waivers, now you're talking about in the next 3 games, only one matchup on paper that looks like a comfortable situation to fire Darrell Henderson up. And then, of course, one of those other 3 weeks is a bye week. So, again, I'm not spending 10% of my budget on Darrell Henderson, maybe 7 to 8%. If I'm only going up to 10% if I am absolutely out of options, but even then, good for Darrell Henderson and his solid performance on Sunday. Turned in a very viable RB2 performance, high-end RB2 performance, depending on your format, depending on the scoring in your league. But that's going to be tough to duplicate against Dallas. Maybe he does it again week 9, and then they've got their bye week 10. So you're really only talking about one, at least right now today, feasible week on paper for Darrell Henderson. I'm not really breaking the bank for him. However, there is a wide open opportunity here for him for the next couple of weeks. So that makes him interesting. Royce Freeman, not so much. Zach Evans, still very much not a part of this backfield, even with the injury to Kyren Williams. So we're not looking to add him, and he's nothing more than a deep league dynasty stash at this point. But the fact that he wasn't able to get into the game pretty much at all, kind of unfortunate for, early developments on Zach Evans, but he's a 6th-round pick from this previous year. It's not totally unsurprising. The top targets this week are probably wide receivers, Josh Downs, Kendrick Bourne. Maybe if Tank Dell was dropped because he's missed the past couple of weeks due to an injury, plus the bye week this past week. But Tank Dell's off to a great start. It's possible whoever had him previously needed the roster spot over these past couple of weeks and dropped him. So he's back on the waiver wire for sure now that he's passed his bye. Off to a pretty strong start so far with CJ Stroud. Looks like a bye week or injury fill-in at best, not necessarily a regular starter, but that's what you're looking for on your bench. Bye week fill-ins, injury replacements, and the like. Guys like Josh Downs, Kendrick Bourne, Tank Dell fit that mold. Josh Downs, maybe even more so. He's probably going to have to. He's forcing a conversation at this point. He's a top 30 wide receiver through 7 weeks so far. Pretty wild. Pretty wild. And he's a wide receiver 2 in fantasy points per game over the past month. So, between Downs and Henderson for your flex in a theoretical situation this year or this week, for me, it's Downs. We're not expecting a repeat performance, what he did against the Browns, which was wildly unexpected given the matchup and how little production Cleveland has allowed to opposing wide receivers this year. But Downs came through in a big way. Busted coverage for a touchdown, but hey, the box score doesn't care about that. Your fantasy lineup doesn't care about that. All that matters is that it happened. So he's looking like a solid pickup if you could use some wide receiver help. Wide receiver help is generally not as needed with how many good wide receivers there are and are available to us. Not just who we added in the draft and already through waivers, but in general, there will always be wide receiver options. There won't always be running back options. That being said, Downs, Kendrick Bourne, who had a really nice day, um, Tank Dell again. If he was dropped, he may not have been dropped, but if somebody in your league needed the roster spot over the past couple of weeks, it's possible he was dropped. Um, all these guys are viable as injury replacements, bye week fill-ins. Hopefully nothing beyond that. But Dell is now past his bye. Downs has been a wide receiver 2 for a month straight. And his value doesn't necessarily take too big of a hit with Gardner Minshew, who is probably one of the better backups in the NFL. Now, well, he's the starter for the rest of the season, but he came into the season as the backup. Probably one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league. So, forget Pittman. You're firing him up regardless, but Downs remains viable. Alec Pierce had, I think, his best game of the season, which wasn't spectacular, but still noteworthy. These are decent, cheap options that you could look to fill out your bench with if you need to. And then, of course, there's a couple of tight end options in the event that you need one, although they're on National Tight Ends Day, including Monday Night Football last night. A lot of tight ends, a lot of the marquee tight ends had big games. Travis Kelce had a huge Travis Kelce game. Mark Andrews did his thing. TJ Hawkinson did his thing. Dallas Goedert had a pretty good game. George Kittle had a decent game. Darren Waller had a good game. Sam Laporta was solid. A lot of really good tight end play this past weekend. But if you do need somebody, if you're streaming tight ends. Maybe you had Luke Musgrave, who unfortunately was knocked from the game after Kareem Jackson. If there's one thing Kareem Jackson likes to do, it's to rack up the dirty hits. He was at it again on Sunday, helmet to helmet with Luke Musgrave. While it doesn't sound like he suffered a concussion, he did hit, the result of that play led to an ankle injury that forced him to miss the rest of the game. So he's looking like he could be shelved this week if you need a tight end because you're streaming. Dalton Kincaid's got a wide open opportunity now. Dawson Knox, the Buffalo Bills, underwent wrist surgery. He's going to be out for a little while. So Dalton Kincaid, as soon as Thursday night, catching passes from Josh Allen is a viable streaming option officially moving forward with Dawson Knox on the mend. Eight catches, 75 yards, easily Kincaid's best game of his young career. He's the tight end 1 in Buffalo for at least the next couple of weeks. So if you need a fill in, as soon as this week, it's not a great matchup against Tampa Bay, but he's going to get all the opportunities at tight end now. Good chance for Dalton Kincaid. If you miss out on Kincaid, Taysom Hill is out there. I would be very cautious about that, though. The reports are that Jawan Johnson is close to returning for New Orleans. So how effective Taysom Hill remains in his Swiss Army knife role continues to be volatile. And if Jawan Johnson comes back, it only muddies those waters further. So I don't necessarily know that I would be looking to grab Taysom Hill off of the wire just because he had a good week. He had a good game Thursday night against the Jaguars. The better pivot at this point at tight end, if you miss on Kincaid and need a stream, is Trey McBride. I would pass on Taysom Hill. Of course, keep an eye on the news with Jawan Johnson. If he's not able to return, then maybe we revisit Taysom Hill later in the week. But I would pass on him for now. And if you don't get Kincaid, grab Trey McBride. Much like Kincaid's situation, McBride is about to step into a larger role. Zach Ertz is being placed on injured reserve with a quad injury. It appears to be a changing of the guard was underway anyway. Ertz has seen declined playing time over the past couple of weeks. McBride's role has increased a little bit. And now, much like Kincaid, McBride steps into the clear-cut tight end one role for Arizona. If you're looking for deep streams, he's got a wide open opportunity ahead of him. Not a great matchup at home against Baltimore. But if you're desperate at tight end, no more Zach Ertz for the Cardinals for at least the next 4 games. So, good opportunity for Trey McBride. Week 8 against Baltimore, week 9 on the road against Cleveland. Not ideal matchups, but weeks 10 and 11, and I'll throw week 12 in there as well. Very favorable matchups on paper against the Falcons, the Texans, and the Rams. All 3 are getting cooked by opposing tight ends. So, maybe not week 8 or 9, but down the road, if you're somebody who's looking down the road for streams, Trey McBride at tight end, worth keeping in mind for weeks 10 to 12. So we can go ahead and get into it. I can review a couple of other names over the course of the stream. But with a couple questions in the chat, can make sure we talk through those now. So let's go ahead and get into it. Greg, good to see you, man. If your first loss is coming after week 7, you're feeling just fine about yourself, you know? Nothing to worry about there. 6-1. You know, if I told you after 7 weeks, if I told you after your first 7 weeks that you're 4-3, you would take that. To be 6-1, you're sitting pretty. So you do have downs out there, but you're not dropping any of those guys to make that happen. Debo's not going to play week 8, so you're moving forward with the names that you have. I mean, none of those guys. You have Nico Collins now past his bye week. Garrett Wilson is now past his bye week. So those are 2 mainstays that you can kind of go back to relying on. You're not moving off of any of those names for any of the guys that are available on waivers. You're just not. All 4 of those guys are better like Cooper, Wilson, Debo, Nico are all better options than guys on the wire. All better options. As far as Henderson, I'm not going all in on Henderson. He's got a tough matchup on the road against Dallas. Again, Henderson had a nice day. He had a strong RB2 day and really came through for anybody who did take a chance on him, even though I had a lot of reservations and was not advocating for him. So um, that one was a bit of a miss. Although he did, again, only average 3.4 yards per carry, 18 for 61 is not incredibly impressive, and he's got a tough matchup this week on the road against Dallas. I'm not, Darrell Henderson did much better than I could have anticipated, but I'm not going out of my way to go all in on him because I'm not going to feel like I can use him until week 9. Week 8 on paper against the Cowboys, that's a rough spot. He's got a decent matchup week 9 against Green Bay, but then his bye week is week 10. So I'm only going to feel like I can use Darrell Henderson once out of the next 3 weeks, which means I'm not going all in on him. 5, 6, 7% of my FOB, sure, okay, fine. 10% of my FOB, no. I can't do that. Will he get usage next week, this coming week against the Cowboys? Sure. But this is a tougher spot, believe it or not. This is a tougher spot than having to go up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. On the road against Dallas, only averaging 3.4 yards per carry last week. It's not necessarily a performance that I'm chasing. Not necessarily chasing Henderson. Yeah. Week 8 against Dallas. Good matchup against Green Bay in week 9. Week 10 bye. Decent matchup at home against Seattle, week 11. It's too early to be thinking about week 11, but on paper, it looks like Henderson could be a viable flex option that week. But then after that, Kyron Williams is coming back, or so we expect. So I'm not going all in on Darrell Henderson. I'm not spending more than 5 to 7% of my FOB. Even if I'm dealing with a lot of bye weeks or injuries, he's usable week 9. But if somebody wants to spend 20% of their FOB for him, let them. Let them. 2 weeks from now is a long way off when it comes to the running back landscape. You never know who else between now and then could emerge as a potential option that is potentially even more enticing than Darrell Henderson. So I'm not going all in on him. As far as a running back that I'd rather have long term, Hunt but probably has the backfield to himself for a couple of weeks. So that probably makes him the most enticing. But Gus had a really strong day. You don't expect him to, take a short pass and take it 80 yards every single time. That is not necessarily Gus Edwards' game. But he's a rock solid contributor on an offense that does a pretty good job running the ball. He gets to play next to Lamar Jackson, who is playing like an MVP yet again. Meanwhile, Hunt scored 2 touchdowns last week, and that's just touchdowns are volatile. They're high variance. We can't predict them. Hunt has a history of having a nose for the end zone, so that is a vote of confidence for him. Jerome Ford will be out for the next, at least this week and potentially next week as well. And for the most part, Hunt has a pretty good schedule for the rest of the season. There's no matchup on paper that really stands out as a difficult one. Meanwhile, Gus has a little bit tougher of a road here moving forward. 14 for 64 for Gus Edwards this past week and a touchdown, and he caught that 80-yard catch. That has to be the biggest play he's ever made in the passing game of his career. So a bit of an outlier there. He finished as an RB1 this week. He hasn't been any better than a low-end wide receiver or running back 2 any other week. He was a running back 1 this week. His other best performance, again, depending on your scoring, in default half PPR scoring, his best performance other than this past Sunday was week 2. He finished as the RB18, 10 carries, 62 yards, and a touchdown. I guess I would say Kareem Hunt. Because Ford is expected to miss a couple of weeks. This could flip-flop, but Ford is expected to miss at least this week, possibly next week as well. So if Hunt has that backfield to himself, then he's got top 15 upside because that's what he did the past couple of weeks. So Hunt for now. Gus still has to deal with, Justice Hill. Lamar, of course, is going to continue to do his thing running the ball. They got Keaton Mitchell mixed in a little bit there in that game. I like Gus Edwards plenty. But for the next couple of weeks, Kareem Hunt is the play. If you're 6-1, 5-2, you're sitting pretty. You want to keep the long view in mind more than anything else. Maybe Gus is more appealing. But at least for the next couple of weeks, it's got to be Kareem Hunt without Jerome Ford. If you can pull that Adams and if you can pull that trade off, then sure, do it. You're going to trade a wide receiver 1 for 2 guys with running back 1 upside. I mean, if you can do it, then yeah, make that happen. I don't know who's saying yes to it, but if you can get somebody to say yes to it, then by all means do it. Anytime you can do a 2-for-1 where you acquire, you give up a great player, but you yourself get 2 great players. Yeah, I'll take 2 great players over 1 great player. I do continue to have a little bit of concern with Saquon long-term just because the Giants are not a very good team. They got to win this week against Washington. That was big for them. They upgrade to 2-5 on the season. Still, even if they go 5-5 to finish the season, they go 7-10, they're missing the playoffs. They put themselves in a big hole starting off 1-5. Now they're 2-5. If they're not in contention for the playoffs, will we not see Saquon during the fantasy playoffs? That's the only concern. But they did get a big win. Division opponent against Washington at home, handled their business, got the win. So that pushes off any concerns about Saquon conversation for about a week. We'll see if that resurfaces in any way after the Giants take on the Jets this weekend. Let's see. Is Gus worth starting? Well, it depends on who your other options are. The Ravens have Arizona this week. That's a pretty damn good option to have given the matchup. But we're not expecting a repeat performance of what he did this past week, even though it's a great matchup against Arizona. We're not necessarily buying that happens again. Matchup is great. It just depends on who else you have. It depends on who your other options are. Outside of this past week, at least in half PPR scoring, let's exclude week 1 because J.K. Dobbins was healthy going into that game. But since week 2, Gus has been the RB18. Not bad. The RB42, the RB37, the RB34, the RB35, and then this past week he was the RB6. Again, depending on your league's scoring, it could have been a little higher or a little lower than that. So he's got one RB1 week. He's got a decent RB2 showing. And then 5 weeks where he's either barely an RB3 or outside of the top 36 altogether entirely. So there's only so much trust I have in Gus Edwards as a fantasy starter. He's a really good NFL player. It's just sometimes his numbers don't always translate to fantasy points. And outside of a week or two this season, that's been the case. Yeah, that's been the case. If you're looking at waiver wire pickups for this week and you're looking at defenses, the Ravens are an obvious choice going against the Cardinals. The fact that they are available, that's the team that I would roll the dice on. That's the defense that I would roll the dice on if that's the waiver. If you need a waiver claim for defenses, if you're looking for a pickup, Baltimore against Arizona. If Baltimore's available, they're not available in too many leagues. If they're available, then that's the team. If you don't get them, if you don't get the Ravens, the Chargers are fine. They're going to be playing the Bears, but also another defense that might be out there that is probably going to fly under the radar, who you don't have to spend any fob on, is Atlanta. They're playing Tennessee, probably without Ryan Tannehill, with either Malik Willis or Will Levis. By all accounts, neither of whom are ready to start an NFL game. It's more alarming for Willis with him being in the second season, but it's not great for Levis either. These are not good options at quarterback for the Titans. Where is that game? It is in Tennessee, but against the Bucks, the Falcons defense wasn't too bad. They only allowed 13 points. They got 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and an interception. And one of those 2 fumbles they've recovered. I'd say that's a pretty strong output. So Baltimore would be number 1 if they are available. They're rostered in 80% of sleeper leagues. So I can't imagine there's too many situations where the Ravens are available. But if they are not, Chargers are fine. And I would say Atlanta is fine as well. Going against the Titans with either Will Levis or Malik Willis as their quarterback. Yeah. Ravens, Chargers, and then the Falcons, who I assume are available. As far as kickers, yeah, how about Dustin Hopkins, man? He's on fire the past couple of weeks. Again, he had a career day. Didn't he have like 3 field goals over 50 yards? Yeah, he had 3 field goals over 50 yards. I mean, 1 over 40, and then 4 extra points for good measure. The Browns do not strike me as an offense that can regularly put up points like that. Not even a fraction of the time. Couple times here and there, okay, maybe. But for the rest of the season, no. I think I lean Aubrey. He's been pretty good to start the season. And given their current makeup, I trust the combination of the Cowboys defense and the Cowboys offense to set the offense up in favorable spots more frequently than I trust the Browns offense to get themselves into good spots. The Browns defense I trust for sure. Myles Garrett might be the best player on defense in the NFL. Over Micah Parsons, over Nick Bosa, whoever else you want to throw in that conversation. Myles Garrett is probably the most dominant individual. Aaron Donald, but at this, he's a little older at this stage of his career. Myles Garrett might be the most dominant player on defense in the league. Dude is unbelievable. I think I trust the Cowboys a little bit more. And so I would go Aubrey. Hopkins is certainly viable. He looks like he looks like he's going to be a pretty good option all season long. But I don't know that we're getting 20 points from our kicker every single week. Probably Aubrey. Probably Aubrey for me. Let's see. I guess, yeah, so Greg, for your question for the defensive streams, another team, another defense, if they're out there, you might as well pick up the Kansas City Chiefs. They are a good unit. They had by their standards, not as strong of a week for production, but Chargers are a solid offense. Although they did hold them to 17 points. That's pretty impressive. I like Kansas City as well. They're just a damn good unit. They're a really strong team. That's a really good defense that the Chiefs have right now. Very strong. So you could go that route as well. instead of Baltimore, the Chargers, the Falcons. I much prefer you know, I much prefer just a flat out good defense, and Kansas City feels like one that you can kind of roll with for the course of the season. Chiefs, Chargers, Falcons in that order. Because the Chiefs are also a long-term hold. Chiefs are a long-term hold. And Astro, you're looking long-term. I guess a slight edge to Gus because Jerome Ford will come back and figures to go back to being the 1A. Hunt's looked solid, but he is older at this point. I guess Gus. Yeah, I guess Gus. If you can get, I have Brees Hall. If somebody offered me James Cook for Brees Hall, I would reject that right away. So if you can catch somebody napping or sleeping, by all means do it. But even after James Cook's performance this past week, which was really good, I'm not taking James Cook over Brees Hall. If I have Brees Hall, I'm keeping him. If somebody wants James Cook for Brees Hall, then yes, get all over that, jump all over that. I can't imagine they go for it. Brees's training wheels have been taken off, and he has looked really good the past couple of weeks. This past Sunday they were on bye, but the past couple of weeks prior to then, Brees has looked like Brees again. Um, James Cook doesn't do it for me as a person who has Brees. I'm gonna need more than that. I'm just gonna need more than that. Yep. Yeah, I mean, Brees Hall is superior talent to James Cook. Um, Better all around player. I have Brees Hall in a redraft league. If somebody offered me James Cook for him 1-to-1, that would be a very easy no for my part. If you can make it happen, by all means do it. I just wouldn't be surprised if the person who has Brees, unless they're a Bills fan or they don't feel great about his week 7 performance when he did very well against the Eagles, I can't imagine going for that. Yeah, can't do that. Oh, it could be a snow game on Sunday. That's a good call out. I'm seeing that now. It says AM snow showers, so could be out of the area by the afternoon. We'll have to keep tabs on that. That might mean that the kickers in that game are not viable. Was that Zerline and Will Lutz? Could be a little chilly in Denver this weekend. That would be fun. Little October snow game. Who to trade for James Conner? None of those guys. I don't know that I would trade any of those guys. Hurts, no. Not Olave, not Metcalf, not Waddle, probably not Watson, probably not Higgins. I don't even know that they get the deal done. Higgins has been quiet this year, and for the most part, so has Watson so far. I would I guess I would wait. I guess I wouldn't really do all that much with James Conner. There's not anybody in that list that's standing out to me. Might just stay put. Because you already have an injured running back with Montgomery, who you're expecting back soon. So, who automatically goes back into your starting lineup the second he's healthy. Yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily a piece there where I would say that guy, trade that guy for James Conner. I don't necessarily see a name here that I would want to move off of. Too many solid options here. Yeah, Deontay looked strong. Deontay looked good in his first game back, but then to that point, George Pickens looked good too. I mean, maybe we've reached a point where both of these guys can regularly be fired up. Is the offense that much elevated between the two of them that you can start both of them with confidence? I had a little bit of concern about Pickens this past weekend with Deontay's return. All he did was catch 5 balls for 107 yards. He didn't score, but that's okay. 5 for 107 will get it done. And then Deontay himself had 5 or 6 for, I think it was like 80 yards. Yeah, 5 for 79. It's not bad. Wide receiver 2 performance in your first game back. It's not bad. That is not terrible. She'll only continue to get stronger. I mean, you can fire him back up into your starting lineup as long as it's not taking somebody obvious out of your lineup. It looks good. Looks good. What's going on, Iron? Good to see you, man. Let's see. You're streaming tight ends. In that order, I would normally have Komet first, but he picked up a goose egg. I would probably say Kincaid here just because he's attached to Josh Allen and no Dawson Knox for a few weeks. Taysom Hill probably gets Jawan Johnson back, so that's going to eat into his snap share, even though Hill lines up all over the damn place. I would say Kincaid, then McBride. Kincaid, then McBride, then Komet, just based off pedigree. I'd be curious to see if McBride flies under the radar with waivers a little bit. There wasn't a ton of fanfare, at least from what I saw, about Zach Ertz going on injured reserve. Kincaid, McBride. I guess I would put Komet third. And then the other guys are like, they're just in that hodgepodge of tight end twos. But Kincaid and Trey McBride certainly have ideal opportunities that they can step into. Kincaid first, McBride second, Komet third. Not that I love it, but but Komet third, and then Hill, Mayer, Logan Thomas. They're all in the same breath. Desperation tight end too. And then Iron. It depends on you can pick up Kendrick Bourne, but who are you dropping, and do you really want to blow all of your fob at this point? You never know what type of last second pickup could end up being the difference maker. I probably wouldn't spend all of it on Kendrick Bourne. I don't think I would spend all of my fob on Kendrick Bourne. A decent chunk of it, sure, yeah. 10, 12, 12 to 15%. That's fine. Yeah. Yeah. So it depends on what you need it for. I like Bourne. I like Bourne quite a bit. He had a strong showing. He had a strong day. Don't necessarily know that I want to drop the rest of my fob on him, though. You know, because now you're hamstrung for the rest of the season. At least with fob bucks. We got a trade question. Okay. Swift, Thielen, Sutton, and Moss for Bijan Hall, Ridley, Devontae Smith. I mean, the the Bijan side, and it's not close. I know Adam Thielen is producing like a wide receiver one right now. Sutton has been pretty good. Moss took a back seat officially to Jonathan Taylor this week, We can go back to firing Jonathan Taylor up into our lineups with full confidence. That's why he is on your team to begin with. Even at the reduced cost, you drafted him high to be a part of your team's foundation, and that time is now. So that makes Moss kind of, that makes him expendable for me. To get Bijan's better than Swift. Devontae is definitely better than Sutton and Moss. He should regularly be better than Adam Thielen, but that's not the case right now. And then Ridley, let's call a spade a spade. Ridley is a boom bust wide receiver 3 at the moment. He might give you a wide receiver 1 performance. He might give you a performance outside the top 50. I mean, the Bijan side, and it's, if you can pull that off, that is a heist. If you can pull that off, that is a heist. That is theft. I'd much rather have the Bijan Breece side. That would be massive, massive theft by you. If you can pull it off, by all means, do it. As long as you're acquiring the Bijan side. Yeah. If anybody, okay. That's another thing that I actually kind of wanted to address. The Bijan Robinson situation from Sunday. I highly doubt that anybody that has him in your league is like so disgusted to the point where they want to trade Bijan. But if he's on the table, now is the perfect time to try to go get him. Because people have a bad taste in their mouths from what happened on Sunday. He practiced all week. No indications that he was on the injury report. Was being fired up by everybody as a normal RB1, the way that Bijan Robinson is usually getting fired up. No questions about, do I start Bijan in my starting lineup for week 7? Of course you do. What kind of question is that? You're not even thinking about, do I have to ask a question about starting Bijan Robinson? He's just one of those dudes that you just fire up, and that's that. And then he doesn't play. He's not out there for the first couple of series. I think after the first quarter, he's only got 1 snap to his credit. Eventually, we go into halftime. He hasn't touched the ball yet, and we find out that he's not feeling well. He's dealing with some type of headache. Arthur Smith didn't say specifically that he had a headache, but that was what was eventually reported after the game, that Bijan can suffer from migraines, and apparently he started to suffer from one Saturday night, and it bothered him to the point where he wasn't able to be his best self on Sunday, and so the Falcons held him out. If that's the case, why did they give him a carry at the very end of the game? He had 1 touch that went for 3 yards late in the fourth quarter. Game was out of reach at that point. What were you trying to do? If Bijan was actually not feeling well, that's one thing. Although the Falcons report that on their injury report. And I'm sure a lot of people right now are rooting for a significant penalty by the NFL on Atlanta for how they handled that situation. But if he's actually sick, he's not feeling well, like you said he wasn't. Bijan himself admitted he had a headache. He wasn't feeling well. Why did he get a carry at the end of that game then? Of course, first of all, why wasn't he just, you know, why wasn't this brought to the attention of the injury report? Why was he not on the injury report? If you knew about it, even if it was Sunday morning, even if it was you didn't find out until Sunday morning, you still have to report that. They failed. They let themselves down. They let the NFL down, and they let a lot of fans down. And they may tell you, like, oh, well, who cares? They don't care. The NFL doesn't care. It's all about the bottom line. They don't care about the fans. They're not, concerned about some fans and their fantasy teams, uh, and whether that impacted them or not because they started Bijan, but they didn't have him. It's like, you don't understand, Atlanta, the magnitude of the situation. How many commercials do we see during a game about FanDuel, Underdog, DraftKings? All of these platforms that are involved with sports betting. With how tied up the NFL is in sports betting, how popular it is, how much of a driver it is for traffic and engagement, and for the Falcons to pull that stunt, I think they deserve a pretty solid penalty for that. And a $100,000 fine of an NFL organization isn't going to do anything. That's pennies in Arthur Blank's pockets. He's not worried about a $100,000 fine. You can say I'm overreacting here if you want, or you can think if you think I'm being crazy or whatever, that's fine. But I think they should lose a draft pick. Not their first, not their second. But I would have no problem taking a 5th round pick away from them as a first penalty for failure to follow and comply with the rules of the injury report and reporting accurate information. And it's already annoying enough that the most annoying coach in the NFL, Arthur Smith, is the one behind it. I don't think we've heard the end of this story. Hopefully, apologies to anybody who may have had Bijan, whether it was in a parlay or your starting lineup, or some type of pick 'em. Whatever prop bets you might have bet, whether you have him as your first round pick from this draft, whatever the case, you got screwed if you have him through no fault of anybody's own. Like, that was a terrible sequence of events by the Atlanta Falcons, and I hope they get, what's coming to them. A fine of $100,000 isn't going to do anything. Take a day 3 pick away from them. Take their 5th round pick away and say, go ahead and try this again and see what happens the next time. I don't think it'll happen again. This does feel like it was ultimately an outlier of a situation. It's just exacerbated because it's the Atlanta Falcons and it's Arthur Smith. Probably, when it comes to fantasy purposes, the most annoying head coach in the NFL. It's a ridiculous development. So just wanted to say my piece on that. It's unfortunate for anybody who had Bijan in their starting lineup. There's nothing that can be done about that unless you, by chance, play in a fantasy league where maybe you have some sort of best ball rules. In which case, the events that transpired in Tampa didn't hurt you because you were able to rely on other guys on your bench. Still frustrating, still annoying. Very curious to see what the punishment is going to be here for the Atlanta Falcons. It needs to be something, and it needs to be something that ideally sends a message. Don't take accurate information and accurate information sharing for granted. And hopefully Bijan gets his full complement of snaps and touches in week 8. Hopefully, anyway. And Iron, you have an empty roster spot. Okay, I mean, if you're competing, Kendrick Bourne is perfectly good depth. Perfectly good wide receiver depth. The Juju Smith-Schuster experiment for New England is going terribly wrong. And to be completely honest, I mean, what from this point moving forward are we gonna see from Juju Smith-Schuster for the rest of his career? It seems like we're teetering on the edge here. He's dealing with these injuries. He hasn't been effective. He hasn't been very good at all for several years now. He had a strain of a nice couple of weeks last year when it seemed like he was starting to find his footing with the Kansas City Chiefs, but then an injury derailed that. He hasn't done much of anything since then. He's missing games yet again with more injuries. I mean, I don't know how much more I don't know how much more Juju has left in the tank. So, Kendrick Bourne, come on down. Wide receiver 1, Kendrick Bourne? I don't think it's Devontae Parker right now, even though for whatever reason they paid him a lot of money in the offseason. Sure. If you have a roster spot to burn and you're a competitor in a dynasty league and Kendrick Bourne is sitting out there, sure. That's fine. He's probably the team's wide receiver 1 for the rest of the season, unless something unexpected happens, I guess I would say in the form of a trade. So yeah, grab Kendrick Bourne. That's totally fine. That's totally fine. Johnny, I'm sorry to hear that you're 1-6, bro. That's never any fun. It's a shitty way to start the season. Not what anybody wanted, not what anybody is hoping for. You're hoping your fortunes are able to turn around. It depends on the guys that you're relying. It depends on the horses that you are relying on. Whoever your top guys are. But I mean, is there a guy on your bench that you can trade? Like a Devon Achane, who is not going to help you for another couple of weeks, but somebody at the top of the standings might be interested in grabbing as a stash for their playoff run. I don't know. Is there anybody like that? Or a David Montgomery? Do you have David Montgomery by chance? I guess the time to trade him was maybe a couple of weeks ago in the same light, in the same vein, to a contender who could absorb the amount of time that he's expected to miss. Let me check. I'm checking Twitter. Edwin Porras. For anybody who's on X recently, Twitter, Edwin Porras is a pretty good injury follow on that platform. He regularly updates projected return dates. So David Montgomery is not expected to return for a couple more weeks. If you have a player like him, trade him to the top seed. Trade him to a top 3 seed. Somebody who's willing to eat the lost weeks in exchange for giving you a player or two that can help you now. Because if you lose the next two matches, 1-8, your season's done. And a stash, like an injured stash, like a David Montgomery or a Devon Achane, is not going to matter. But while you can still potentially scrap a couple of wins together, if you've got an injured player that a contender might be interested in grabbing because they're able to absorb the short-term hit, and in exchange they give you a player or two that can help you now, that's something that you want to look into. Yeah, that's something that you would want to be looking into. So just depends on your situation. If you're able to turn it around, I mean, all you need is a couple of wins over the next couple of weeks. And, even at 3-6, it still doesn't feel great, but you at least put yourself in a position to still have a chance toward the end of the year. So shake it up if you have to. Make a trade or two. If I'm at, if I ever have a season where I'm sitting at 2-4 or 2-5, and it's just like through the first half of the season, it just hasn't gone my way. It's just like, okay, I'm going to shake things up because what I have right now isn't working, you know? Yeah. Make trades as needed. Okay, I'll run through a couple of different options for waiver wire ads. We are at the end of the chat for now, so I'll give it a few minutes. If there aren't any other questions, that's perfectly fine. I'll run through some options for the waiver wire that you might be looking at. I'll go through them by position. We'll run through that one more time for waiver wire Tuesday, and then we could probably look to wrapping this thing up. I will be back on Thursday, as always, ahead of Thursday night football. Bills Bucks this week, I think. So interesting matchup for sure. Decent matchup, all things considered. A little bit one-sided, but there's fantasy talent for sure on both sides of the ball in this matchup. So should be good. I'll be back for that Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern. And then, of course, you guys already know the Saturday, Sunday streams, 6 p on Saturday, 11 on Sunday. But let's go ahead and do like some whip around real quick for waiver wire options, and then we can close it out for the night. At quarterback, at this point, he may have already been picked up in wake of the news last week, but if Kyler Murray is out there, you probably want to find a way to get him on your roster unless you have Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, or Lamar. Am I missing anybody? Any obvious, like Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, Lamar Jackson? If you don't have one of those guys, you might as well pick up Kyler. Given the state of the position, the state of with the different injuries and the performance, the inconsistent performances with a lot of these guys at this position, it's looking like Kyler is going to play this second half of this season. And all he has done for his career is average 20 fantasy points per game. It's a new coach, Jonathan Gannon. DeAndre Hopkins has moved on. So he's down to, Marquise Brown, Trey McBride, Rondale Moore, Michael Wilson. It's a little bit more of a ragtag crew of talent, but the offensive line is improving around him. Paris Johnson, the top tackle in the draft. Maybe he doesn't run a ton, but unless you have a bona fide, clear-cut stud at the position, he's probably the guy worth trying to grab if he's not already rostered. I believe he's still available in about 60% of leagues. If the quarterbacks where you don't need to worry about grabbing Kyler is if you have Hurts, Mahomes, Allen, Lamar. I'll throw Tua in there, and honestly, I am inclined to throw Trevor Lawrence in there as well. And I guess Joe Burrow, even though Burrow has been it's been up and down for Burrow this year. But you figure he's eventually going to get right from this calf injury that has been bothering him to start this season. If you don't have any one of those guys, and I'm including Justin Herbert in this, he's replaceable at this point. If you've got Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins had a nice game on Monday night, but he's up and down and he doesn't have Justin Jefferson. You have Justin Fields, who's going to continue to miss some time. Jared Goff, Russell Wilson, Jordan Love. God forbid if you have somebody like Deshaun Watson. I mean, Kyler Murray is the quarterback pickup right now if he's still available and you don't have one of those top 6 guys. Hurts, Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Tua, and I'll also include Lawrence and Burrow in there. That's pretty much it. So add Kyler if you don't have one of those guys. At running back, I guess Darrell Henderson is the top target this week. If like Chuba Hubbard's not available, I guess Tyler Algier, Roshan Johnson. If those guys are all unavailable, then Darrell Henderson figures to see decent work here over the next couple of weeks, although it is a tough spot this coming week against Dallas on the road. I don't know that I trust him even as a flex play. Then it's a week 9 bye, and then week 10. Or, excuse me, it's week 9 against Green Bay. That's a good matchup, but then week 10 is the bye week. So Henderson could be, 5 to 7% of your FOB. I wouldn't go higher than that. He's really only usable once over the next 3 weeks, in my opinion. But he would be the top target at running back. And I'll continue to pound the table. I'll say it as many times as I need to. Grab Tajay Spears, man. If he's still out there, I'm telling you, a blow up of the Tennessee Titans could be coming. It's already underway. They traded starting safety Kevin Byard to the Philadelphia Eagles. This would seem to be indicating that the Titans are embracing the fact that this is not their year. More veterans could be on the move. I don't know if they have the guts or the balls to trade Derrick Henry, but they should. And if they do, if they come to their senses, realize that they need to hit the reset button and look to the future, the Titans would be smart to whatever they can get, even if it's, they get a 4th round pick in return and they pay most of Henry's salary and they send Henry to another team, a contender. Tajay Spears in that scenario, Tajay Spears is a league winner. Check, and make sure that he is not on waivers. If he is available, grab him. The chances that the Titans blow it up is officially greater than 0 because they already kind of started the process when they traded Kevin Byard yesterday. Ryan Tannehill's probably not going to play for a couple more weeks. If they move Derrick Henry, and again, I don't know that they have the stones to do it, But if they move Derrick Henry, Tajay Spears is a league winner. Also, for anybody who's an NBA fan, real quick, just shout out the TNT crew is back, and I get to watch Chuck and Shaq be goofy all NBA season long. I'm happy to have that back. I got a few pick'ems going tonight. We'll see how that goes. So that's my continued shameless plug for Tajay Spears. I am pretty sure he is still available. Let me double check his availability. I thought it was still under 50%. But we're running out of time here to secure him. Yep. On Yahoo, in Yahoo leagues, Tajay Spears is still available in almost 60% of leagues. If he is out there, I am telling you guys, I'm telling y'all, get him, grab him. I'd rather spend more FOB this week on Tajay Spears than Darrell Henderson. Yeah. Grab Tajay Spears if he's still out there. This is pretty much the last chance because the trade deadline is in about a week, I think, right? It's like Halloween this year. I think it's October 31st or October 30th, something like that. What date is the trade deadline? It's the 31st. So literally in 1 week. Who do the Titans have this week? I think they have the Falcons. Oh, man, Arthur Smith. Little revenge game. It's not really a revenge game, but it is an old team type of thing. Tennessee is hosting the Atlanta Falcons. If the Falcons beat the Titans, which honestly they probably should because the Titans are going to be starting either Will Levis or Malik Willis, the Falcons should win that game even though it's a road game for them. If that happens, the chances that Derrick Henry gets traded, I say, do go up. This is your last chance to add Tajay Spears. At worst, you drop him a few weeks from now for another trendy pickup. At best, he's a league winner. This is your last chance to get Tajay Spears. I should probably make a short video about this. Like, make sure Tajay Spears is not on waivers. I should probably put something like that out on the channel just as like a public service announcement. Get Tajay Spears on your roster if he is available. All right, I've said enough about that. I'll go to the wide receivers and tight ends here in a minute. I do have a couple more questions in the chat, so let's talk through those. Yes, Greg, Kyler over Watson as a stash. Deshaun Watson is the return on investment for the Cleveland Browns so far. I know it's still sort of early, but good God. I don't know that I can't think of a worse right now long-term contract that doesn't feel like it is completely blowing up in the face of the team that doled the contract out. It's bad. It's real bad. So yeah, Kyler over Watson for sure. As a stash right now. He's not going to play probably until week 9 or 10, so you need to hold down the fort with another player this week, but Watson might not even play. They are saying that they were protecting the player from a potential, he had to pass some concussion tests, but even though he passed the concussion tests, they decided to hold him out ultimately. Could there still be more things going on with his shoulder injury? Who the hell knows? The rotator cuff, all that good stuff. Deshaun Watson is looking like an incredibly volatile rest of season option at quarterback. I would not feel comfortable continuing to ride with him at this point. So yeah, if Kyler's out there, Kyler, I would say Kyler is trending toward being a better stash than Deshaun Watson. In superflex formats, you can't drop Deshaun. You just can't. You have to have that quarterback depth because you never know what could happen. But in one quarterback leagues, especially if it's not a keeper league, Watson can be dropped at this point, in my opinion. Superflex, you got to drop. Superflex, you have to hold Deshaun Watson. You just have to. One quarterback, see ya. See ya. And if that means that Kyler, if that means that you can add Kyler, to me at this point right now, all the more reason. All the more reason. All right. A few more questions here. Should you trade Addison and London for Higgins and Demercado? No, no, no. Uh-uh. No, I would not. I mean, Addison had obviously, he's only 7 games into his career. He had the best game of his young career on Monday night last night. He scorched the 49ers, and honestly, he could have had a bigger night. Kirk Cousins, it wasn't a it was bang bang. He just missed him. It wasn't a horrendously bad throw, but he missed him in the back of the end zone for what would have been a third score. Addison could have had a monster night. I mean, he had a monster night. He could have had an even bigger night if that ball in the back of the end zone is a little bit more on where it needed to be. Now, London is frustrating, right? But it's not London's fault. It's the quarterback and it's the offense, right? London's very up and down, but he still had 6 grabs for 54 yards. He has a tough stretch on paper of games coming up after the bye week, which is a crucial stretch of the season. So that's a little dicey. Since the goose egg week 1, London has cleared 50 yards receiving in 4 of 6 games. He's got 2 touchdowns. Not great, but at least he has a couple of scores. He's got a wide receiver 1 week, 3 wide receiver 2 weeks, and then last week he put up a wide receiver. This past week he put up a wide receiver 3 week. It just feels like a lot to give up for Higgins, who he himself hasn't done that much so far this year. And Demercado, I mean, I need to double check Edwin Porras' projection for when James Conner is returning. James Conner's expected back week 10 or 11. So, how much longer is Demercado potentially going to be a viable fill-in at running back? 2 more weeks? Maybe? 2 or 3 more weeks? Maybe? Best case scenario? But if James Conner comes back 100%, Demercado is going to go back to he's going to be a drop. In 10 and 12 team redraft leagues, he's going to be a drop. And then you're essentially trading Addison and London for Higgins. And while Higgins is probably the most talented of those 3, we're banking in that scenario. We're banking a lot on is Joe Burrow able to get healthy, able to get right and stay right for the rest of the season. I don't think I could pull the trigger on that. I don't think I could pull the trigger on that. I need a better right. And right now, to be fair, you can ask for more from Addison. You are well within your right to ask for a pretty good return for Addison. I would ask for if you want to get Higgins and Demercado for Addison. Okay, I would do that and keep London. Okay, fine. That's a little more enticing because now you're rolling the dice on, okay, T. Higgins is a proven player. It hasn't been his year yet to this point, but we're expecting a healthy Joe Burrow in the second half of the season. Okay, fine. I can see that logic. After the night that Addison had last night, you should be able to ask for Higgins and Demercado for just Addison alone. If you can pull that off, I'm a little more on board with it. I'd be a little bit more on board with it. Not both, not Addison and London. Because Demercado is probably going to go back to the waiver wire probably in a month's time. Maybe less. Have I heard anything about Henderson going back to the practice squad? Did they do that? Are they just doing this thing where they have a certain number of transactions over the course of the season, moves back to the practice squad? Yeah, I think this is just for roster flexibility purposes. But again, if you're this does bring up a little bit of uncertainty of like, how much do you want to commit to Darrell Henderson as a waiver wire pickup? I wouldn't put more than 5% of your FOB on him because I don't think you're going to be able to use him week 8 against Dallas. You could use him week 9 against Green Bay. That's a good matchup on paper. But then week 10 is his bye week. Week 11, I think they've got Seattle at home. So he could be viable there. But then it's week 12, and we expect Kyren Williams back by then. So you're really only talking about 2 weeks out of the next 4. You're really only talking about 2 weeks out of the next 4 where Henderson might be a guy that you want to put in your flex. Maybe. I know he had a solid fantasy day. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying Henderson. I have liked Henderson in the past. I just don't. I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical at this point. Not going to feel good using him against the Cowboys this week. Could use him against the Packers week 9, theoretically. And then week 10, it's his bye week. Yeah. I don't feel great about that. Don't feel great about that with Darrell Henderson. How worried am I about Austin Eckler? He didn't have a particularly big day. And he's been a little quiet since he came back from the injury. Those were some pretty tough matchups, though, against Dallas in his first game back and against Kansas City on the road. Those are 2 tough spots. Look at Eckler's schedule, though, for the rest of the season. He's got the Bears this week. Good. Jets on the road, a little bit tougher, but by the numbers, the Jets are actually giving up some decent production to running backs. He's got the Lions at home. That's a tough spot. But then look at this. Packers, Ravens, Patriots, Broncos, Raiders, Bills, Broncos. On the whole, that is a pretty damn favorable schedule for Austin Eckler. I think I would hold. Unless your running backs are, did you grab Breece Hall in the 3rd? Did you grab Jonathan Taylor in the 4th? Did you get Raheem Mostert in the 9th or 10th round? And you have all of these guys, including Eckler? Do you have all those dudes? Do you have Breece Hall? Do you have Jonathan Taylor? Do you have Raheem Mostert? Did you pick up Kyren Williams at the very beginning of the season and you're just kind of waiting on him to come back? Do you have all of these dudes? And you could use a wide receiver. Okay, fine. Understandable. But I think we need to exercise some patience with Austin Eckler here. He missed 3 games, 4 weeks in total when you factor in their bye. That's another thing. Austin Eckler is past his bye week. That is done. That's over with. You can theoretically fire Eckler up into your starting lineup every week for the rest of the season. And then he got past the worst of it. He doesn't play the Chiefs again during the fantasy season. That's week 18. Bears, Jets, Lions, Packers, Ravens, Patriots, Broncos, Raiders, Bills, Broncos. There are like maybe 2 rough-ish matchups in there. All of the others are very favorable. I would not be moving off of Austin Eckler. I would be trying to exude patience for Austin Eckler, especially because right now you'd be selling low on him. Not that Amon-Ra is a low acquisition, but if I'm moving Austin Eckler, it's only because I have Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor. I drafted Breece Hall in the 3rd or 4th, Taylor in the 4th or 5th. I got Raheem Mostert in the 9th or 10th. Maybe I got David Montgomery somewhere in there in the 6th or 7th, who I'm waiting on to come back. And I picked up Kyron Williams. If I hit every lottery ticket at running back this year and I have Austin Eckler and I could use a wide receiver, then okay, fine, whatever. That's one thing. If that's not the case, though, Eckler's not the running back I would be moving. Just look at the schedule. Just look at the schedule. Oh, man, I completely missed the start of this Nuggets-Lakers game. I got D'Angelo Russell over on points, rebounds, and assists. I got Kevon Looney tonight over on rebounds. I think it was 9.5. Draymond Green's not playing tonight, so that should feel good. Sorry for anybody who's like, I don't give a shit about basketball, but now I'm watching it, and now I'm like, Russell's got an assist to start things off. That's cool. And I did maybe go a little ham and grab Jokic's prop, which was like his points, rebounds, and assists total, which is like 48.5, but he's a psycho. So not ever worried about his production. Anyway, so that's my thoughts about Eckler. Oh, Greg. Okay. Well, Greg, as far as your quarterback situation, there's got to be somebody else on the wire that we can use for week 9. But you're firing Trevor Lawrence up with full confidence. I am not worried about Trevor Lawrence. I feel like he's rounding into form. And remember, the Jags the schedule did them the NFL didn't do them any favors from their scheduling perspective to begin the season. Now they're going to have a little bit more, they got a little bit more rest coming up. They have this mini bye week. They have 10 days off because they played Thursday night last week. Then it's their bye week. And then I think they play on Monday, not Monday night, week 10. There's more, I know for a fact, there's more space for the most part in between, for the most part, the games on their schedule for the rest of the season. That's got to help with conditioning and rest and recovery and all those little intangibles. I'm not worried about Trevor Lawrence one bit. He'll be fine. Let's see. Would I trade T. Higgins and James Cook for Bijan? Yeah, in theory, as long as your wide receivers are okay. As long as your wide receivers are fine. Like, who are your wide receivers? Because this is, keep in mind, guys, if you're selling a guy like T. Higgins, you're selling low on him. He's only had one good week this year. He's been quiet, and also he's been injured. He's been quiet, and also he's been injured. Come on, Russell, hit this 3. That doesn't help my pick him at all with the miss like that. Okay. Yeah, you're selling low on T. Higgins. Now, Bijan is a guy that's an RB1 that you're talking about, but you're giving up 2 pretty strong pieces here. So if you're stout at wide receiver, then sure. Okay, fine. I'm fine with acquiring Bijan right now, assuming that Arthur Smith doesn't pull any more of that garbage that he did this past Sunday. But in theory, yes, I am fine with acquiring Bijan. People are going to have a sour taste in their mouth right now about Bijan after this past week. I think the last person we blame in that scenario, though, is Bijan himself. That's on the Falcons. That's on Arthur Smith. That's they failed to disclose information. Whatever it is, I'll be very curious to see what the results are of the NFL's investigation into the situation. I wouldn't be worried about Bijan moving forward. I don't think the Rams are a destination for Derrick Henry. They are a little bit better, I think, than people thought they would be this year, but they're not quite ready. They're not quite there yet. Plus, I don't even know how much cap space they have with all the money that they're paying to Stafford and Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp, and there's a lot of cap space sucked up by a select few number of Rams players. I'm thinking Broncos because I'm watching Denver play right now, but it's the Nuggets, not the Broncos. The Rams have so much money tied up to like 3 or 4 guys. I don't think, unless they can do it for like a 5th round pick and Tennessee agrees to pay the full salary, which I don't see that happening. As far as Hollywood or Downs this week, I tend to, I try to, I'm not trying to discourage start sit questions on Tuesday, but it's just such a tough call right now. We don't have the vibes of this week. We don't have practice reports. We don't have injury reports. Josh Downs had a great game last week. Hollywood had a pedestrian week last week. Arizona gets Baltimore. Indianapolis gets, who does Indianapolis have this week, actually? I need to look that up. Like, I'm in a vacuum. Hollywood, because he's the proven guy, they get the Saints. The Colts do. They get the Saints at home. So that's not a bad spot. That's not a bad spot for Downs. Meanwhile, I think Hollywood, the Cardinals host the Ravens. Ooh, that's a revenge game for Marquise Brown. That's a revenge game for Marquise Brown. They traded him to the Cardinals. Let's not forget that. I kind of like that. I kind of like that revenge game factor for Marquise Brown. It's tough, though. Start-sit questions on a Tuesday are tough. I will feel more comfortable definitively answering that, whether it's on Saturday or Sunday. But I like those X factor intangibles when I can find them, and Hollywood's got a revenge game this week, so I kind of like that. I kind of like Hollywood. Come back, Z, on Saturday or Sunday, and appreciate the subscription. Thanks for joining up. Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Do start sit help on the channel. When we've got the most information available to us from practice reports, injury reports, all that good stuff. But Hollywood, revenge game against the Ravens. Keep it in mind. Let's see. Would I trade Pollard and Amari Cooper for Keenan Allen? It feels like a lot. It feels like a lot. Allen should be funneled, peppered targets all season long, obviously. 4 catches for 55 yards this past week. I'm not going to hold a down week for against Keenan Allen. That's just going to happen. Rest of his schedule was the same as Austin Eckler. Bears, Jets, Lions, Packers, Ravens, Patriots, Broncos, Raiders, Bills, Broncos. It's not bad. On paper, they are tough matchups by the numbers, but the Bears are not a tough matchup. The Lions in the secondary, that's not a tough matchup. Packers, he would see Jair Alexander. Well, actually, he might not if he avoids him in the slot. Ravens, they've been dealing with secondary issues. The Patriots have secondary issues. He gets the Broncos twice, including championship week. Broncos are a train wreck. And then in between that, he gets the Raiders and the Bills. Nothing scary about those matchups at all. Um, it just feels like an expensive 2-for-1. Feels like an expensive 2-for-1. Like, everyone has been clamoring that Tony Pollard is off to a slow start and he hasn't been great this year compared to expectations. And yeah, that's for the most part true. But also, Tony Pollard, depending on your scoring, I think in default half PPR scoring so far, he's been the RB 15 or better 4 out of 6 games. It's not like Pollard is like, it's not like it's a Ramondre Stevenson situation where it's just like, oh my God, this dude is doing a fraction of what I was hoping. Pollard he's gotten by. He's been all right. The linchpin here is Cooper, who obviously it's a gross situation in Cleveland with the quarterback. It would be a good upgrade going from Cooper to Allen. I just don't know if at the expense of also losing Pollard, it's something I want to do. You have Brees, but you're not going to have Achane for a couple more weeks. So, like, who are you replacing Pollard with in the interim? That's the only thing. That's the only thing. Like, who would you be replacing? Who You have Achane on IR, but who are you replacing Pollard with now if you make this trade? It's an upgrade going from Cooper to Allen. I don't know if losing Pollard is ultimately worth it. Greg, yeah, I like Foreman as a stash for the next couple of. Well, we got to see what Roshan's practice status is this week. Even if he comes back, even if Roshan comes back, I mean, you would think Foreman has done enough to maintain a role for the next couple of weeks while Khalil Herbert is on IR. You would think. As far as the rest of the season goes, Foreman and Hunt are in the same range. Both are a little bit more intriguing than Henderson. I guess Hunt has a chance to stick longer than Foreman, assuming Khalil Herbert comes back and they want to utilize Herbert and Roshan as their top 2 guys. Yeah. I guess slight edge to Hunt rest of season. But if Roshan can't go, then next week you have to fire up Foreman if you have him. But we got to see the practice reports on Roshan. Got to think he's coming back this week. Generally speaking, concussions, not to take them lightly, but after about 2 weeks, typically it's like, okay, players are recovered from it. Generally. So, Hunt long term, but Foreman maybe a little bit more short term. Foreman maybe a little bit more short term, especially if Roshan is forced to miss another week. And okay, just to finish up, Roberto, your question here. You have Foreman, Roshan, Henderson. Yeah, okay. And you have Tyreek, who is the best receiver in football right now. I would not do that trade. I would not do that trade because now you're down to Brees, who I love. Brees is awesome. Brees can absolutely be an RB1 rest of season, but then you're waiting on Achane. And then Foreman and Roshan could start to cannibalize each other. Henderson is probably going to go back to being waiver wire fodder when Kyron Williams comes back. I would not do that. I would not do that trade. Upgrading from Amari Cooper to Keenan Allen is great. Having to give up Pollard to make it happen is not great. I don't like that. I don't like that trade. Nah, I would stay put. And yeah, Greg, none of Palmer, Rice, Downs, none of those guys over the guys you already have. No. London is up and down and frustrating, but he's too talented to give up on. Nico has, I think, come on pretty strong this season. He's a little up and down, but for the most part, you feel comfortable with him. Cooper and Wilson, they have their warts, but you're relying on them. You're relying on guys like that. Over Downs, over Rice on a week-to-week basis, you're relying on guys like them. Yep. Who would I pick up between Chuba, Akers, and Demercado? Probably Chuba. Miles Sanders isn't right now. And Frank Reich admitted coming out of the bye week, it's probably going to be a 50-50 split moving forward. I have no reason to believe it isn't. Miles Sanders, he's dealing with the injuries. He's not off to a good start. He's in a much worse situation this year than he was last year. And I don't think, no disrespect to Miles Sanders, in NFL terms, just comparing him to NFL players, I just don't think he's that. I don't think he's all that. He's okay. He's not great. I see no reason why they don't use Chuba a little bit more. Like, they paid Miles Sanders good money, but Miles Sanders is not so far giving them a good return on investment. Chuba, he hasn't looked great through the first couple seasons of his career, but he certainly looks improved this season. Chuba. Akers got in there. Man, I believed strongly in Cam Akers this season, and that's blown up in my face. However, he did look solid last night with the opportunities that he got. I think he got a couple more touches than Madison did. Still only turned 10 carries into 31 yards. That's not great, but obviously he had the really nice catch and run for 30 yards. That was good. I like Akers, but we're not quite there yet given his circumstances. And then with Demercado, I know he went from being a very intriguing waiver wire pickup in week 6 to doing absolutely nothing to probably getting dropped this week. But then he came back to life with 13 carries for 58 yards and he caught 4 balls week 7. And it's just like, what the hell do we do with this Cardinals backfield? I say the answer is ignore it until James Conner comes back. Hubbard. I would grab Chuba. I would grab Chuba. I would grab Chuba. And Z, you're welcome. Appreciate the appreciate the subscription. Glad you enjoyed the thought process. Traded Pickens and Downs for Dameon Pierce and Zay Flowers. I'd say that's pretty good. You addressed a need. Pierce hasn't been like a world beater, but he's running back depth, and that's all you need to say. It's running back depth. Like, boom, end of sentence. I mean, everybody needs running back depth. So you got running back depth. And Pierce is, like, let's put it this way. There's nothing's going to happen to Dameon Pierce's job. He's going to get the ball. Devin Singletary is an okay player who is probably not going to supplant Dameon Pierce. And then on top of it, you got the wide receiver who's probably in that trade, probably the one who's the most worth having for the rest of the season. Pickens, I like Pickens. And he had a nice day in Deontay Johnson's return. Went over 100 yards receiving. Pickens is a good player. But Flowers is in the better offense, the more reliable offense, catching passes from the much better quarterback. Lamar Jackson is the damn MVP right now. So, I would say you won that trade. And I'm not I don't like answering like, did I win? Did I lose? It's not about trades are not about did I win or did I lose? It's did I get better? Did I make my team better? Regardless of what I gave up and what I acquired, did I make my team better? I would say you kind of answered your own question. You needed running back depth. You got good running back depth without having to give running back up. I'd say you made your team better and therefore you won. And that's all that matters. No, I think that's a good job. I think that's a good trade. I like Pickens. He sold high on downs. Flowers looks like that dude for the Ravens, at least at wide receiver. I mean, Odell Beckham is what, 31, 32-year-old shell of himself might be a little harsh, but you get what I'm saying. And I think Flowers has already surpassed Rashad Bateman, who we all had high hopes for, but as it turns out, Rashad Bateman might just be kind of blah. I mean, Flowers has done more in 7 games than Rashad Bateman has done in 3 years. Flowers has cleared 50 yards receiving in every game but one this year. In the one game he didn't, he had 48 yards. So he just missed it. And in that game, he caught 8 balls. So, like, as long as you're playing half PPR or full PPR, like a normal human being, because standard scoring is archaic and, for the dinosaurs, I mean, you are very happy with Zay Flowers thus far. Yeah, no, nicely done. I think it's a good trade. I think it's a good job. Let's see. I don't know that I liked the Giants this past weekend, Greg, against Washington. Officially, honestly, anybody who's playing Washington, they're going to get sacks. They're going to get sacks. I don't care if it's a college defense. They're going to sack Sam Howell 3 times. Who's Washington have this week? Oh, it's Philly. Well, they're not. They're not available. The Eagles' defense is rostered everywhere. But I would say it wasn't as much the Giants this past week. It's go take a look at Washington's schedule. And if all else fails, grab the defense that's playing the Washington Commanders because Sam Howell is on pace to get sacked like he's David Carr. Remember that guy from the Houston Texans? Didn't he get sacked like 600 times his rookie season? Come on, Russell. God damn it, he's off to a bad start. These player pick'ems are going to drain my bank account. And it's only the first night of the season, of the NBA season. No, it's not so much the Giants as much as it is just go find the defense that's playing Washington. They will get sacks. They will get sacks. All right. You were offered Christian Kirk for Stevenson. No. No. I would not do that. I mean, if it's if it's full PPR, definitely not, but probably not even if it's half PPR. Christian Kirk is Christian Kirk, not Calvin Ridley, is the Jaguars wide receiver 1. Oh, reversed. You were offered Kirk for Stevenson. Sorry. I misread that. Yeah. So take the deal. Well, okay. It depends on your running backs. Stevenson has been disappointing, but also he's still running back depth. And so there's value to be had in that. It depends on who your other running backs are. But if you're good at running back, if you can afford to lose Stevenson because you've got at least 3 other, hopefully 4, but if you've got 3 other viable, solid options that you can turn to any given week, I would make that trade. Oh, McCaffrey. Well, McCaffrey alone makes pretty much any running back expendable. You get Mixon back coming back off of his bye. We're hoping um, that the Bengals offense turns things around. But you do have him past his bye for the rest of the season, so that's great. Javonte has been a little bit better. He had a touchdown called back on a holding penalty that shouldn't have been called. He should have had a touchdown this past weekend. He didn't. It got wiped off the board because of a BS holding call. And then Chuba is decent depth. If your wide receivers are hurting, or if it's not the best group of wide receivers, I would make this trade. I would make this trade. As of today, right now, Christian Kirk for the rest of the season, we're not expecting wide receiver 1 outputs from Christian Kirk every week, but the fact that you can pretty much fire Christian Kirk into your lineup and he's all but assured to give you a rock solid wide receiver 2 performance as his floor for the season, that makes him a top 12 wide receiver, if that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I would make this trade. And honestly, I would fire Henderson off into this trade as well and see if you can sneak back maybe like a backup running back in the deal. Like whoever the last 1 or 2 running back, whoever the last running back is on this person's roster who you're trying to make the trade with, like see if you can catch him sleeping, offer Darrell Henderson in the deal and get another running back in return. But if you can't make that happen, ultimately, I would still take Kirk for Stevenson 1-for-1, given your situation. I would take Kirk. He has Gibson and Dillon. Could you? You could try. I mean, I would try it. I would throw Henderson in the deal. And see if you can get Dillon back. Dillon or Gibson. Screw it. One of those two. I do think Aaron Jones is on the come up. I'm not investing in Dillon all that much. However, Dillon has a role even when Aaron Jones is 100%. I would kick the tires on it. I would try to expand it. Throw Henderson in there. See if you can catch him napping. And get so Henderson and Stevenson from you get Kirk and Dillon back. So at least you still get like another running back in the deal. To kind of keep your running back depth somewhat steady. I'll try it. If they don't go for it, I would still do it. I would still do Stevenson and Kirk for Kirk 1-for-1. Yeah. Kirk is a rock solid wide receiver 2 every week, which makes him a top 12 to 15 wide receiver rest of season because of how reliable he has proven to be. And I think the Jags as an offense are trending up. They weathered a pretty tough start to the season with a lot of games crammed into a small amount of time. I think we're going to see better play from Trevor Lawrence moving forward, and that's only going to help Christian Kirk. Hopefully it helps Calvin Ridley too, but right now he's not that team's wide receiver 1. It's Christian Kirk. So yeah, give it a whirl. Trade Ridley and Montgomery for Swift and Jefferson. David Montgomery's expected back in a couple of weeks. Ridley right now, let's call a spade a spade. Calvin Ridley is a boom bust wide receiver 3. Has there been any update? Probably not in Jefferson's rehab. I'm a little leery about acquiring Justin Jefferson in general. They did get a huge win last night against the San Francisco 49ers. That takes the Vikings season off of life support for a couple of weeks. They're back to 3-4. So Jefferson has become a little bit more intriguing as a stash. You're essentially trading right now. Ridley is a boom bust wide receiver 3. Montgomery should go back to being an RB1 when he is healthy. In exchange for Swift is a high end RB2. Jefferson is the ultimate wild card right now because we don't know when he's going to be ready. The messaging, the language that was put out there after Jefferson was put on IR was that he might not necessarily be ready to return right away after the IR stint. If that is the case, we're looking at a situation where we might not see Justin Jefferson until like week 14 because the Vikings have a week 13 bye. So Jefferson's absence could easily turn into 6 or 7 games instead of 4. That's the only thing with Justin Jefferson. I would still be opting with a lot of caution with acquiring Jefferson. If you could do Ridley for Jefferson straight up, that feels like a decent roll of the dice as long as you have other wide receivers right now that you can rely on. But just be wary. Obviously, when healthy, Jefferson is a top 3 player in fantasy football. But you're not going to have him week 8. You're not going to have him week 9. You're not going to have him week 10. If we don't have him week 11 and 12, that's a long time to wait for Justin Jefferson. It's a really long time to wait. That's the only thing. If you feel, if your gut is telling you, well, okay, I have Addison, so that'll hold me over. I can do this. I can get by. Then okay, fine, sure. If you feel in your heart, like in your gut, heart of hearts, like this is a gamble that I am willing to take, want to take, and feel like I can take, then do it. Trust your gut. I always tell them, trust your gut. Listen to your gut. If your gut is telling you to do something, do it. So I'm okay with it. I would just caution that Jefferson, we might be waiting on him for a while, and Montgomery is a running back 1 when he comes back healthy. In that role, in that offense, behind that offensive line, Jahmyr Gibbs had a bit of a coming out party in a blowout loss. Well, from a fantasy perspective, he had a coming out party, but David Montgomery ain't going anywhere when he comes back. Montgomery's not going anywhere when he comes back. So I would just be careful with that. Swift is on a crazy good tear for the Eagles, so he's in a very similar spot. The problem with Swift is his touchdown upside is low because anytime it's a short yardage situation or a goal line situation, the Eagles are going to just do the tush push with Jalen Hurts. Swift is on a great run right now. It might be tough for him to sustain it over the course of the season with his touchdown upside being as limited as it is. Ridley for Jefferson straight up. I like that risk a little bit more by itself. If I had Diggs, Amon-Ra, There's a lot of really good wide receivers in here. Would I trade Lamb for Swift? Now, that one's a little bit more interesting, but I don't know who all your other running backs are. Do you guys know CD is only averaging like 7 targets a game this year? Like, what the hell is that all about? You have CD Lamb and you're only throwing him the ball 7 times a game. It's wild. I would need to know who your other running backs are, but if you need running backs, okay. Brees, Pacheco. You have Diggs, Amon-Ra, and Keenan Allen. Yeah, I would trade CD to get Swift. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I don't get it, man. Okay, I guess the one thing is it is full PPR and CD is CD's a stud. Regardless of the start that he's off to thus far, he is a stud. But yeah, he's averaging 7 targets a game. Like, what the hell is that all about? Like, okay, 1 for 1. It might be a little, CD might round into form eventually, and maybe he goes back to being CD Lamb in the second half of the season. And again, keep in mind, DeAndre Swift's touchdown upside is low because Jalen Hurts is taking every short yardage and goal line opportunity. Swift basically needs to break a long run to score a touchdown. Not long, but his touchdowns for DeAndre Swift are going to have to come from 10 to 15 yards out. He's not going to get goal line touches. That's all Jalen Hurts. So that's the only thing. But if you need the running back help and you have other anchors at wide receiver, that's okay. I guess it's okay. Saquon would be a better get. Obviously, yeah, you're probably not going to be able to get Saquon for CD. I would just caution with Saquon. I just want to be careful with him because it's the Giants. It's the Giants' season. They're 2-5. They got to win against Washington on Sunday. Good for them. They're 2-5. In their final 10 games, even if they go 500, they're 7-10. Is Saquon, who can make more money next year, he can get another contract next year, is he going to throw his body on the line for a team that's not going to the playoffs? Saquon seems like he's a proud guy, like a proud player. I'm sure he probably wants to be out there. He wants to play. He's saying all the right things. He doesn't want to get traded, this, that, and the other. That's all great. That's all well and good. But if the Giants, if it's week 14, week 15, the fantasy playoffs, and the Giants are still 3 or 4 games under 500, clearly going nowhere fast, is Saquon going to randomly pick up an injury? My ankle hurts. My back hurts. My knee hurts. I'm going to sit out. That's I'm just painting a picture here. I'm not trying to predict anything. I'm just giving you guys a scenario that we want to be aware of with Saquon. From that perspective, I do prefer players on good teams to players to. I would, this might bite me, a little bit more frequently than not. I'd rather have a good player on a good team than a great player on a bad team. All things equal. Would I rather have Saquon than Swift? Of course. But I also have some concerns, like given the way the Giants season has started and how it could continue to go, will they be in playoff contention? Will they be in a position where the games late in the season matter for them? Therefore, Saquon is suiting up and giving 100%. That's the only thing. I think grabbing a running back, Mr. Grapefruit, makes sense. Swift for CD is probably fine. CD's obviously the better player, and in full PPR, wide receivers are always going to be a little bit more valued. But I think he's expendable because of the other guys that you have. So if you want to trade him for Swift, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, that's okay. All right, I'm going to wrap up these last few questions. Dubs against the Dolphins. I mean, yeah, that's a good spot for him. Dubs has been pretty solid this year. Dubs has been pretty consistent. He had a bad showing against Vegas, but Dubs has been a top 15 wide receiver 3 times. And this past week, he only caught 2 balls, but he did score. He got a touchdown. Oh, he's not playing the Dolphins this week. Dubs is playing the Vikings. Still a really good matchup. And it's at home. So I would feel fine. If you have to fire Dubs up, that's fine. If you have to fire Dubs up, that's fine. At home against the Vikings, there's nothing scary about that. What would I do with Bijan so I have a league. I have Bijan. I'm also 3-4. I lost this past week because Bijan didn't play, and we didn't even know that we had no idea that was going to be the case. So a little frustrating. I'm not doing anything. I'm holding. Unless you're stout at running back, I'm not moving him. I'm not doing anything about it. And I know his usage is frustrating, right? Tyler Algier is getting a lot more work than we probably anticipated coming into this season. Bijan is not a bell cow right now. Who knows if he will be at any point this season? It might, unfortunately, take a Tyler Algier injury for that to happen. But I'm not doing anything with Bijan. He's still a top 5 running back to me for the rest of the season. He's still a top 5 running back for the rest of the season. I have him in that same exact scenario. I'm not doing anything with him. I'm just going to hold. Unless you can get a stud wide receiver for him. You're not going to get Tyreek Hill 1-for-1, but yeah. Like if you really, if you're great at running back and you could use a wide receiver and you can get Stephon Diggs or Amon-Ra or Devontae Adams, then okay, fine. But you better be stout at running back to do anything with Bijan. I'm not moving him personally. This past week was frustrating. Hopefully it's an outlier. Ideally, the NFL punishes the Falcons enough to the point where they don't pull this crap again. And we fire up Bijan with plenty of confidence next week. And yes, if you can get Tajay Spears, get Tajay Spears. I've been all over wanting to grab Tajay Spears and adding him to your roster for weeks now. We could be seeing a Titans implosion coming up. Get Tajay Spears. Get him on your roster. All right. Let's see. Alejandro, you've got offers for Cup. Is that Rashad White and DJ Moore or Edwards and Jacobs? So your wide receivers are what? Cup, Cooper, Rashee Rice, Gabe, and Dubs. And your backs are Henry, Javonte, Moss, and Kyron. You do need a running back. I feel like you could get more than Rashad and DJ Moore. I feel like I know Cup had a quiet game this past week, but he's still Cooper freaking Cup. And Moore has been, outside of 2 weeks, Moore has been kind of pedestrian this year. I don't mind the Rashad White acquisition, but I would want I would want a little bit more of a reliable wide receiver than DJ Moore if I'm giving up Cooper Kupp. Could you give up like Dubs for Rashad White 1-for-1? Keep Kupp, get Rashad for somebody like Dubs. Dubs has been a top 15 wide receiver like 3 or 4 out of 6 weeks. Meanwhile, Rashad White has been pretty blah outside of a couple weeks. I feel it. I would try to do something smaller. I would rather keep Kupp. I would offer, like, can you do Dubs for Rashad White or Gabe for Rashad White? Could you do that? That way you get a little bit of running back depth. You maintain your top options at wide receiver. I would try to go that route. I would try to do something smaller. But you should grab a running back. You should try to find a way to grab a running back. Like, or if it's Kupp for Jacobs instead of Gus Edwards, get a depth wide receiver from them. Throw in Zach Moss if you have to. That might even net you a slightly better wide receiver in the return. Like, could you do Kupp if you have to? If you do a big move, could you do Kupp and Moss for Jacobs and whoever their third or fourth wide receiver is? I don't think that's a ridiculous ask. I would try something like, I would either try something small like Dubs for Rashad White, or if you're going to give up Kupp for Jacobs, throw Moss in that deal and try to get a decent wide receiver back in the deal. Something like that. Okay, this is a start sit question. There's a lot of good running backs to choose from there. I mean, if you have to bench one of those dudes, I don't want to bench any of them. You got to fire up ETN. You got to I guess, like, by default, is it Mostert? I don't want to bench Mostert. That's a tough call, Carlos. Without having practice reports and injury reports and all that stuff throughout the week, that's a tough call right now. If you can come back, I'll host more streams this week, 6 p.m. Eastern, Thursday and Saturday, and then 11 a.m. Eastern on Sunday. Saturday, the weekends are specific start stream help or start sit help. That's a tough call this early in the week without having injury and practice reports, but like, those ETN, Taylor, and Brees you drafted those dudes to be horses. Mostert has been an incredibly pleasant surprise to start this season, but those last 3 names are the guys that you drafted to be your dogs, to be your dudes, to carry you. I probably need to fire up those last 3 names, ETN, Taylor, and Brees. But try to come back later in the week if you can, once we get practice reports on Wednesday, practice reports on Thursday, if there's any injuries that we know about, whether it's the players themselves or their opponent. If any of their, if any of their opponents are dealing with an injury on the defensive side, or if, say Jeff Wilson is dealing with an injury and then that boosts Mostert. This is something we want to revisit later in the week if you're able to come back. If not, tentatively, in a vacuum, those last three names, ETN, Taylor, and Brees. Yep. We've reached the end of the chat. Or let me get Josh's question really quick. Yes, I would do that. Yes. If you're getting Burrow on a bit of a buy low here, you've got really strong wide receiver options, so Shaheed is expendable. Yeah, I would do that. And Burrow on the bounce back for the rest of the season. Yeah, you do that trade. You do that trade. What up, Rojo? Yeah, you do that trade. We're in agreement here. We're expecting Burrow to bounce back the second half of the season. Got off to a slow start with the calf injury. They just had their bye week. This could be the time where the Bengals start to kind of get right. Maybe they round into form. I would do that trade. Move off of Russ. The Broncos feel like I know they beat the Packers. They got to win on Sunday. Yeah. I would want to move off of them too. The Broncos they won, but they're still a sinking ship. They're still a sinking ship. I would still do that deal. Let's redraft. Yeah, I would take Burrow. And plus, now he's past his bye week. So Burrow can just be your guy rest of season. I think Russ's bye week is in a couple of weeks. So so now you move off of that. You don't even have to worry about it. I would do that trade. I would do that deal. I would do that deal. Yeah. It's a good roster. It's a good team for a 20 team league. That's a good collection of talent. Nicely done. Yeah, that's a pretty good collection of talent for a 20-man league. I like it. Yeah. Do that trade. Get Burrow. I think as long as that calf injury isn't bothering him for the second half of the season, and it shouldn't, especially with the bye week, I would say agreed. I would say that's worth it. I would do that deal. Excuse me. All right. Wrapping this up. Appreciate everybody coming in, hanging out, talking shop today, asking and answering questions. Thank you guys so much for the engagement. I'll be back on Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern, ahead of Thursday Night Football, ahead of Bills Bucks. So if you've got any start-sit questions then, we can go over those. If there are any new developments on the trade front, we can talk through those. AMA, as always. Appreciate you guys coming in, spending time, taking time out of y'all's schedule to hang out with me. It's much appreciated. I'll see you guys on Thursday. If not Thursday, I will definitely be doing my Saturday and Sunday streams as well for Start Sit Help. Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern. But that'll do it for tonight. Everybody have a great night. Have a great continued rest of the week. And I will see you guys on Thursday. Thanks, everybody.